Billionaire CEO discovers the doctor caring for his grandmother is pregnant with his child. A night of unstoppable passion, a secret blooming inside her, and a love that defies all odds. My beautiful family, this heartwarming romance will touch your soul. Don't miss a second. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter Stories. Before we begin, let's take a moment for a beautiful prayer for my most loving family. May love, joy, and endless blessings fill your hearts. May all your dreams come true, and may we continue this journey together with strength and happiness. My beautiful family, I see that you are enjoying our stories, and it makes me so happy. Your love and support mean the world to me and James. But I have noticed that our beautiful views are going down day by day. The 20,000 followers challenge before March 31st seems difficult, but I believe in the power of my family. YouTube is reducing our reach, but we can fight back. If each and every one of you likes, shares, and comments on the video and follows the channel, we can rise again and make a strong comeback. Are you present, my beautiful family? Let me know in the comments. And now this beautiful story will be presented by Mr. James. Let's start with love.
Chapter 1. First encounter. Sean Tate's Italian leather shoes echoed against the polished floor of Seaside Memorial Hospital's cardiac wing. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking, commanded boardrooms of intimidating executives, and stood firm against market crashes that decimated competitors. None of that had prepared him for the raw fear gripping his chest at the thought of his grandmother's fragile heart failing. Lillian had raised him after his parents' fatal yacht accident, transforming from indulgent grandmother to fierce protector overnight. Now her mortality confronted him with cold hospital lighting and the antiseptic scent that failed to mask the underlying current of human vulnerability. "Mr. Tate," he turned toward the voice, authoritative yet melodic, and found himself momentarily speechless. The woman approaching wore a pristine white coat over emerald scrubs that somehow enhanced the warm amber of her eyes. Her glossy black hair was swept into a practical knot, yet tendrils had escaped to frame a face that struck him as arrestingly beautiful in its quiet intelligence. "I'm Dr. Althea Amaya, your grandmother's cardiologist." Her handshake was firm, professional, yet the moment their palms connected, something electric passed between them. A microscopic hesitation, a fraction of a second where neither moved to release the other's hand. Sean watched her pupils dilate slightly, confirmation that whatever that spark was, she'd felt it too. "How is she?" His voice emerged rougher than intended. "Stable now. Her arrhythmia was severe, but we've managed to regulate her heartbeat." Dr. Amaya reached for the chart hanging at the foot of Lillian's bed, and Sean instinctively moved for it simultaneously. Their fingers brushed against the metal clipboard. Time seemed to crystallize into a perfect suspended moment. Her smooth skin against his, the subtle fragrance of something floral and sophisticated emanating from her wrist, the catch in her breath that wasn't quite professional. "Sorry," they said in unison, then shared a smile that transformed her clinical beauty into something that tightened Sean's chest for reasons entirely unrelated to worry. "Please," he gestured, stepping back. Althea took the chart, using it as an anchor for her suddenly scattered thoughts. In 10 years of medicine, she'd never been so instantly aware of a patient's family member. She'd built her reputation on calm competence, on maintaining boundaries that allowed her to provide exceptional care without emotional entanglement. Yet something about this man, beyond his obvious physical appeal, reached past her careful defenses. "The next 24 hours are critical," she explained, forcing her attention back to medicine. "We'll monitor her continuously, adjust medications as needed, and hope to see improvement in cardiac function." Lillian stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering open. At 83, she remained a striking woman, her silver hair framing aristocratic features that had softened with age but lost none of their character. "Sean, darling," she murmured, her voice thin but determined. "Stop looking so grave. I'm hardly at death's door." Althea watched as Sean's expression transformed, the commanding CEO vanishing as he bent to kiss his grandmother's forehead with tender reverence. "You nearly gave me a heart attack, Lil," he said softly, using a childhood nickname that made the elderly woman smile. "You couldn't have chosen a less dramatic way to get my attention? Where would be the fun in that?" Lillian's gaze shifted to Althea, sharp intelligence undiminished by illness. "And who is this lovely doctor?" "Dr. Amaya," Althea introduced herself, checking the monitors. "I'll be overseeing your care." "How fortunate for me," Lillian said, her eyes twinkling as they moved between her grandson and the doctor. Even in her weakened state, she missed nothing. "Sean, be a dear and pour me some water." As he moved to comply, Althea stepped closer to adjust Lillian's pillows. The elderly woman caught her wrist with surprising strength. "He works too hard," she whispered conspiratorially. "Brilliant boy, but forgets there's more to life than that company of his." "Grandmother," Sean warned, returning with the water. "Don't start matchmaking from your hospital bed." A flush of warmth crept up Althea's neck. "Mrs. Tate needs rest, not excitement. I suggest keeping conversations calm and brief." She stepped back, reclaiming professional distance. "I'll return in an hour to check her progress." Sean watched her go, unable to ignore how the simple white coat did nothing to disguise the graceful confidence of her movements. He dated models, actresses, fellow executives, women of undeniable beauty and accomplishment. None had affected him like this doctor with her composed exterior and eyes that revealed depths of compassion and intellect. "She's lovely," Lillian observed, not bothering to hide her approval. "She's your doctor," Sean countered, "and entirely too professional to appreciate your meddling." "I nearly died today," his grandmother reminded him with theatrical timing. "Indulge me." Later that evening, after Lillian had fallen asleep, Sean stood at the window of her private room, watching darkness settle over the coastline. The door opened quietly behind him. "Mr. Tate," Althea said softly, not wanting to wake her patient, "you should get some rest. We have your contact information if anything changes." He turned, struck again by her presence, somehow both soothing and disquieting to his carefully ordered existence. "I'll stay a while longer." Althea approached the bed, checking monitors with practiced efficiency. The dim lighting softened her features, and Sean found himself studying the elegant curve of her neck, the delicate arch of her eyebrows as she concentrated. "She means everything to me," he said, surprising himself with the confession. "After my parents died, she—" He stopped, unwilling to burden this professional woman with personal history. "She raised you," Althea finished, her voice gentle. "She told me while you were getting coffee. She's very proud of you." Their eyes met across Lillian's sleeping form, something unspoken passing between them. Recognition of the peculiar intimacy created in hospital rooms where life's fragility stripped away pretense. "Will she recover fully?" he asked, the question carrying more vulnerability than he'd allow in any boardroom. Althea moved closer, forgetting briefly about professional distance. "Her heart is stronger than the tests initially indicated. She's responding well to treatment." Without thinking, she touched his arm lightly. "She's a fighter." The contact, though brief, left warmth cascading through Sean's body. Althea withdrew her hand quickly, surprised at her own action. "I should continue my rounds," she said, stepping back. "Thank you, Doctor." "Amaya." His voice had softened to a timbre that somehow made her formal title sound like an endearment. "Althea," she corrected impulsively, then immediately questioned her judgment. "Althea," he repeated, the name like silk on his tongue. "I'm Sean." She nodded once, professionally, Yet her heart raced with awareness that had nothing to do with medicine as she left the room. Walking down the corridor, she tried to dismiss the lingering sensation of something significant beginning. A current shifted, a trajectory altered by the simple accident of their meeting. In the quiet hospital room, Sean returned to the window, his reflection ghostly against the darkness beyond. For the first time since the emergency call had come that morning, his thoughts weren't solely focused on his grandmother's health. Instead, they wandered to amber eyes and the unexpected comfort of a gentle voice saying his name. Lillian, not nearly as asleep as she appeared, smiled secretly to herself. Perhaps her troublesome heart had perfect timing after all. Chapter 2. Healing Touch. 3 days into Lillian's hospital stay, Althea found herself unconsciously checking her reflection in the elevator doors before entering room 407. She'd told herself it was professional concern driving her frequent visits to the Tate matriarch, but the flutter in her stomach when Sean was present suggested otherwise. Today he stood at the window, silhouetted against afternoon sunlight. The crisp lines of his tailored shirt stretched across broad shoulders as he spoke quietly into his phone. He turned at her entrance, those startling blue eyes warming instantly, and ended his call with a swiftness that suggested she took priority. "Dr. Amaya," he greeted, her title from his lips somehow intimate. "Your grandmother's tests show improvement," Althea said, approaching Lillian's bed where the elegant older woman watched their interaction with poorly concealed interest. "Her heart rhythm is stabilizing." "Excellent news," Lillian smiled, squeezing Althea's hand. "Perhaps you can convince my grandson to go home and shower. He's been here nearly non-stop." "I'm perfectly fine," Sean protested, though the shadow of stubble along his jaw and slight weariness around his eyes betrayed him. "Your grandmother is stable," Althea assured him, trying to maintain professional distance despite the magnetic pull she felt whenever they occupied the same space. "The staff can reach you within minutes if anything changes." Their gazes held a moment longer than necessary, something unspoken passing between them. Sean nodded, brushing his hand against hers as he reached for his suit jacket. A touch so brief it might have been accidental, yet the contact sent warmth cascading through her. "I'll return this evening," he promised his grandmother, bending to kiss her forehead. After he left, Lillian patted the edge of her bed. "Sit with me a moment, dear." Althea hesitated, then perched beside her patient, charmed by the woman's indomitable spirit. "He carries too much responsibility," Lillian confided. "Always has since losing his parents. Sean was only 17 when he became the man of the family." "He clearly adores you," Althea responded, fighting her unprofessional interest in learning more about him. Lillian's knowing eyes sparkled. "And what do you think of my grandson, Doctor?" "Amaya. He seems very—" Althea paused, searching for an appropriately neutral word. "Devoted." Lillian's laugh ended in a small cough. "Devoted," she repeated with amusement. "An interesting choice of descriptor for a man who makes most women lose their composure entirely." Althea's cheeks warmed. "Mrs. Tate, I should continue my rounds." "Lillian, please," the older woman corrected, "and forgive an old woman's meddling. When you reach my age, matchmaking becomes irresistible." "There's nothing to match," Althea insisted gently, rising to check the monitors. "Professional ethics are quite clear about doctor-patient relationships." "I'm your patient, dear, not him," Lillian observed with mischievous logic. "And I'd very much like to see my grandson smile the way he does when you enter the room more often." The emergency alert came at 2:14 a.m. Althea had just finished charting when her pager vibrated. "Cardiac distress, room 407. She ran down the corridor, heart pounding with a fear that transcended professional concern. Sean was already there, hair tousled from sleep, still wearing what appeared to be hastily donned clothes over pajama bottoms. His face was a mask of controlled terror as nurses worked efficiently around Lillian's bed, where alarms beeped in urgent cadence. Arrhythmias returned, the night nurse reported, blood pressure dropping. "Increase the drip rate," Althea ordered, moving to Lillian's side. The elderly woman's face was ashen, her breathing labored. "Prepare 5 milligrams of—" "Althea," Lillian whispered, using her first name with startling intimacy. Her trembling hand reached out and Althea took it instinctively. "Tell him, don't waste time on regrets." "You can tell me yourself, Lil," Sean said firmly, appearing at Althea's shoulder. "You're going nowhere." The equipment stabilized gradually as medications took effect. 40 tense minutes later, Lillian slept peacefully, her crisis averted. The nurses departed, leaving Althea and Sean alone in the dimly lit room, the machine's steady rhythm the only sound. "I thought I'd lose her," Sean confessed, his voice raw with emotion he'd concealed until now. Without thinking, Althea placed her hand on his forearm. "She's stronger than her condition suggests." In the solarium down the hall where they retreated to avoid disturbing Lillian, moonlight streamed through glass walls, casting everything in silver-blue radiance. They stood before the massive windows overlooking the sleeping coastline, city lights twinkling against darkness. "You saved her again," Sean said quietly. "It's my job," Althea demurred, though his gratitude warmed her more than it should. "It's more than that." He turned to face her fully. "You care about her, not just as a patient." "She's easy to care about," Althea admitted, aware they'd stepped into dangerous territory. The professional distance she maintained with patients' families was crumbling around this man, whose presence affected her so viscerally. A slight shiver passed through her in the cool air of the solarium. Without hesitation, Sean removed his jacket, thrown on hastily when the hospital called, and draped it over her shoulders. His fingertips brushed against her collarbone during this simple act of chivalry, lingering a heartbeat longer than necessary. The contact sent electricity racing through her body, awakening nerve endings she hadn't realized were dormant. "Thank you," she murmured, enveloped in his scent, sandalwood, cedar, something uniquely him that made her heart race. "Althea," he said, her name a caress on his lips. They stood close now, drawn together by something beyond their control. His eyes dropped to her mouth, his intention clear. She knew she should step back, cite professional ethics, maintain boundaries. Instead, she found herself leaning imperceptibly closer, her body betraying her mind's cautions. Their faces were inches apart, the air between them charged with possibility, when the solarium door opened. A nurse appeared, clipboard in hand. "Dr. Amaya. Mrs. Carson in 415 is asking for pain medication." Reality crashed back. Althea stepped away from Sean, slipping his jacket from her shoulders and returning it with hands that weren't quite steady. "I should go," she said, professionalism reasserting itself though her pulse still raced. Sean's eyes held hers, filled with unspoken promise. "This conversation isn't finished." She nodded once, not trusting her voice, and followed the nurse from the solarium. Walking down the corridor, Althea pressed her cool palm against her flushed cheek, knowing with certainty that whatever had begun between them in that moonlit moment had fundamentally altered something within her, something that all her professional training couldn't possibly have prepared her for. Chapter 3. Unexpected Night. "Your grandmother can be discharged tomorrow morning," Althea announced, signing the final forms on Lillian's chart. 2 weeks of treatment had strengthened the elderly woman's heart considerably. She'll need follow-up visits and medication management, but she's stable enough to recover at home. Lillian clapped her hands together like a delighted child. "Wonderful. My own bed at last." Sean's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. For 14 days, this hospital room had given him a legitimate reason to see Althea daily. Their near kiss in the solarium hung between them, acknowledged only in lingering glances and accidental touches whenever they reviewed Lillian's progress together. "We should celebrate," Lillian declared. "Sean, why don't you take this lovely doctor to dinner? A proper thank you for saving my life." Althea felt heat rise to her cheeks. "That's not necessary." "It's absolutely necessary," Sean interrupted, seizing the opportunity. "In fact, I insist. Tonight, if you're free." His eyes held hers with an intensity that made her stomach flutter. Professional ethics dictated refusal, but Lillian would no longer be her patient tomorrow. One dinner as a thank you seemed harmless enough, or so Althea told herself, ignoring the voice of reason, whispering that nothing about Sean Tate felt harmless to her carefully ordered life. "I finish at 7, she heard herself say. "I'll pick you up at the main entrance." The smile that lit his face sent her pulse racing as she left the room, wondering what she'd just agreed to. La Perla was a hidden gem, a small Italian restaurant nestled in a cove, accessible only by a winding coastal road. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic ocean views, while inside candlelight danced across white tablecloths and crystal glasses. "This is beautiful," Althea murmured as they were seated at a secluded corner table. She'd rushed home to change, selecting a sapphire wrap dress that felt both elegant and understated. The appreciation in Sean's eyes when he saw her suggested she'd chosen well. "I thought you might enjoy somewhere quiet, away from the hospital," Sean replied, looking devastatingly handsome in a charcoal suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. "Somewhere we could talk without interruption." The sommelier approached with a vintage bottle of wine. Sean ordered for them both with easy confidence, then raised his glass once they were alone again. "To new beginnings," he proposed. The rich Cabernet warmed Althea's veins as they fell into effortless conversation. Without the constraints of the hospital setting, she discovered a man of surprising depth. Passionate about medical technology, knowledgeable about art, endearingly devoted to his grandmother. Their fingertips met accidentally with increasing frequency across the table, each casual touch sending currents of awareness through her body. "How did you choose cardiology?" Sean asked as they shared a decadent tiramisu, his fork occasionally feeding her across the table in a gesture both innocent and intimate. "My father died of heart failure when I was 12, she revealed, surprised at her willingness to share something so personal. "I wanted to understand what took him from us. Maybe save other families from experiencing that loss." Sean's hand covered hers, warm and strong. "He'd be proud of you." The first heavy raindrops struck the windows just as they finished their espresso. By the time they reached the parking lot, the storm had intensified dramatically, sheets of water reducing visibility to mere feet. "My beach house is just 10 minutes from here," Sean offered as lightning forked across the sky. "We could wait out the worst of it there. Driving back to the city in this would be dangerous." Common sense told Althea to decline. The electricity between them had built throughout dinner, each glance more charged than the last. Being alone in his house would test restraint, already stretched dangerously thin. Thunder crashed overhead, making her decision as the rain soaked through her light jacket. "Lead the way. I'll follow you." Sean's beach house was a modernist marvel of glass and cedar, perched on the cliffside, offering breathtaking ocean views even through the storm's fury. Inside, the open-concept space featured sleek furniture, abstract art, and floor-to-ceiling windows that currently displayed nature's spectacular light show. "You're soaked," Sean observed, taking her dripping jacket. "Let me find you something dry." He disappeared upstairs, returning with a soft gray Henley and black sweatpants. "The bathroom's through there," he indicated. "Make yourself comfortable." Alone in the marble bathroom, Althea peeled off her wet dress, the silk clinging to her skin. She caught her reflection in the mirror, cheeks flushed, eyes bright with anticipation or apprehension. She wasn't sure which. Sean's shirt enveloped her in his scent, the soft fabric skimming her curves. The pants were hopeless, so she folded them neatly, her bare legs extending beneath the hem of the shirt that reached mid-thigh. When she emerged, Sean had changed into jeans and a fitted black t-shirt. He'd lit a fire that cast golden light across the room and opened a bottle of wine. He turned at her entrance, his expression changing as he took in her appearance. Hair loose around her shoulders, legs bare, his shirt transforming into something inexplicably sensual on her body. "Better?" he asked, his voice dropping to a register that sent shivers through her. "Much," she replied, accepting the wine glass he offered. They stood before the panoramic windows, watching lightning illuminate the churning ocean below. The storm outside mirrored the tempest building between them, wild, inevitable, elemental. "I've thought about you constantly since we met," Sean confessed, turning to face her. "I've never been so distracted in board meetings, checking my watch, calculating when I could return to the hospital to see you." Althea's heart hammered against her ribs. "I told myself it was professional interest, making me check on Lillian so frequently." "And was it?" His eyes held hers, seeking truth. "No," she whispered. The wine glass was removed gently from her hand, set aside. Sean stepped closer, one hand lifting to trace the curve of her cheek with reverent fingertips. "In the solarium, we were interrupted," he murmured. "I've imagined 100 times what would have happened if that nurse hadn't arrived." "Show me," Althea breathed, abandoning caution. His kiss began with exquisite gentleness, a question asked and answered as her lips parted beneath his. The tenderness lasted only moments before hunger took over, weeks of restraint dissolving into desperate need. His hands tangled in her hair as he deepened the kiss, tasting of wine and desire. Althea pressed closer, her fingers exploring the solid warmth of his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palm. Lightning flashed, illuminating them in electric blue as they surrendered to the chemistry that had simmered since their first touch. Sean's hands slid beneath the shirt she wore, discovering bare skin that burned beneath his touch. Her soft gasp was swallowed by his mouth as he lifted her effortlessly, her legs wrapping around his waist as he carried her to the panoramic windows. "I want to see you in the lightning," he whispered against her throat, pressing her gently against the cool glass. The contrast of temperatures, his heated body before her, the storm-chilled window at her back, heightened every sensation as his lips traced a burning path down her neck. Outside, thunder crashed as his hands explored her body with passionate reverence, discovering what made her gasp, what drew out the soft moans she tried to suppress. The Henley was discarded, leaving her nearly bare before his hungry gaze. "You're beautiful," he breathed, lightning illuminating her skin to alabaster perfection as the storm reached its crescendo outside. Words gave way to sensation as they made their way to the plush rug before the fireplace, clothing abandoned, inhibitions forgotten. Their bodies came together with urgent need, the culmination of tension that had built since their first electric touch in the hospital corridor. Sean worshipped her with passionate intensity, his hands and mouth learning the geography of her body as if committing it to memory. When they finally joined, the connection transcended physical pleasure, something essential recognized and claimed between them. They moved together with perfect synchronicity, the firelight casting golden patterns across sweat-slicked skin as the storm raged on, matching their passion with its own wild energy. Later, wrapped in soft blankets on the rug, her head resting on his chest as rain continued to lash the windows, Althea knew with absolute certainty that tonight had irrevocably changed something within her. Whatever began in this storm-swept house couldn't be classified as a simple indiscretion or filed away as a pleasant memory. Sean's fingers traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder as he pressed a kiss to her temple. "Stay," he whispered, the single word carrying layers of meaning beyond the night's obvious conclusion. The rational part of her, the careful, controlled doctor, urged caution, reminded her of complicated ethical boundaries, of different worlds colliding, of maintaining professional distance. But as lightning illuminated his face, revealing vulnerability beneath desire, Althea found herself nodding, surrendering to something that felt remarkably like fate. Outside, the storm began to subside, unaware it had forever altered the course of 2 lives caught in its fury. Chapter 4. Professional Distance. Dawn painted Sean's bedroom in soft pastels, sunlight replacing the storm's fury. Althea woke to unfamiliar luxury, Egyptian cotton sheets against bare skin, the rhythmic sound of waves breaking on rocks below. For one blissful moment, she existed solely in sensation, the pleasant ache in her body, the warmth of Sean's arm draped possessively across her waist. Then reality intruded with merciless clarity. She had slept with a patient's grandson. The ethical boundary might be technically intact. Lillian was discharged, no longer under her care, but the professional line had been undeniably crossed. What had felt like fate in the storm-tossed darkness now seemed reckless in morning light. Carefully extracting herself from Sean's embrace, she gathered her clothes, still damp from last night's rain. In the bathroom, her reflection told a damning story. Tousled hair, a telltale mark on her neck, eyes bright with lingering pleasure. The sophisticated cardiologist had vanished, replaced by a woman who had surrendered to desire without weighing consequences. When she emerged, Sean stood by the bedroom windows in low-slung sweatpants, the morning sun gilding his muscled torso. The sight nearly unraveled her resolve. "Hey," he smiled, reaching for her. "I thought maybe you'd slipped away." She stepped back, avoiding his touch. "Sean, about last night." His expression shifted, sensing her withdrawal. "You're having regrets." "I'm a doctor. There are ethical considerations." "My grandmother is no longer your patient," he countered. "There's no conflict of interest." "It's complicated," Althea insisted, struggling to articulate the professional boundaries that seemed absurdly insignificant compared to the connection they'd shared. "Last night was incredible, but I need to maintain separation between my personal and professional lives." Disappointment clouded his features. So this was a one-time occurrence? A storm-induced aberration? The hurt beneath his measured tone made her chest ache. Last night had been transcendent, not just physically, but the rare connection that had formed between them. Yet, her career had been built on careful control, on never allowing emotions to compromise judgment. "I think it's best if we take a step back," she said finally. "Your grandmother will need follow-up care, and I don't want our situation to complicate her treatment." Sean studied her, those penetrating blue eyes seeing more than she wanted to reveal. "Is that really what you want, Althea?" "No," her heart screamed. What she wanted was to cross the room, press herself against his warmth, and forget the careful boundaries she'd constructed around her life. Instead, she nodded, clutching her damp dress like armor. "I'll drive you home," he said after a moment, his tone professionally neutral. The drive back to her apartment passed in tense silence, the intimacy of the previous night replaced by careful distance. When he pulled up outside her building, he reached into his jacket pocket and handed her a business card. "My private number," he explained. "If you change your mind." She accepted it reflexively, their fingers brushing one last time. Goodbye, Sean. The following weeks brought blessed routine. Althea immersed herself in patience and research, trying to forget how perfectly Sean's body had fit against hers, how his laugh resonated in her chest, how his touch had awakened parts of her long dormant. Lillian's follow-up appointments were scheduled with another cardiologist, a professional courtesy Althea had arranged, citing a heavy patient load. If her colleagues noticed she checked Lillian's chart more frequently than protocol required, they didn't mention it. The hospital charity gala arrived, an annual event Althea usually enjoyed. She'd chosen her gown weeks ago, a floor-length emerald silk that complemented her olive complexion. As she applied a final touch of lipstick, her phone chimed with the evening's schedule. Her breath caught at the donor list. Sean Tate, CEO of Tate Wellness Technologies, had made a substantial donation to the cardiology department. She considered feigning illness, then dismissed the thought as cowardice. She was a professional. She could handle seeing him in a public setting. The ballroom glittered with crystal chandeliers and designer gowns. Althea accepted a champagne flute from a passing waiter, scanning the crowd with practiced casualness. She spotted him across the room, devastating in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, engaged in conversation with the hospital board chairman. As if sensing her gaze, he looked up, their eyes connecting across the crowded space. The world around them seemed to fade as recognition, longing, and hurt passed between them in silent communication. "Doctor?" Amaya, a voice beside her, broke the spell. Dr. Richards, chief of cardiology, appeared at her elbow. "Have you met Sean Tate? His company just funded our new pediatric cardiac wing." Before she could formulate an excuse, Richards was guiding her toward Sean, whose expression remained carefully neutral as they approached. "We've met," Sean said smoothly, extending his hand. "Doctor, Amaya treated my grandmother last month." She accepted his handshake, electricity shooting up her arm at the contact. "Mr. Tate, your grandmother is doing well, I hope." "Thriving, thanks to excellent care." His thumb brushed imperceptibly across her wrist before releasing her hand. "She asks about you frequently." The polite fiction of casual acquaintance continued through mundane conversation about hospital improvements and medical technology. Beneath the surface pleasantries, undercurrents of tension crackled between them like lightning before a storm. When Richards was called away, Althea prepared to retreat, but Sean's quiet voice stopped her. "You look beautiful tonight." 3 simple words, spoken with such sincerity that her carefully constructed walls trembled. "Thank you," she managed. "Your donation is incredibly generous." "I have a personal interest in cardiac health now," he replied, a hint of his usual warmth returning. "How have you been, Althea?" The sound of her name on his lips made her heart stutter. "Busy. Work keeps me distracted," he supplied. "Me too, though not successfully." A server appeared with fresh champagne, providing momentary reprieve from his intense gaze. Althea accepted a glass gratefully. "I should circulate," she said, needing distance before her resolve crumbled completely. "Of course." He stepped back respectfully. "But, Althea, I meant what I said that morning. When you're ready to talk, I'll be waiting." She nodded once, unable to trust her voice, and moved away through the crowd. But the weight of his business card, still carried in her evening clutch, seemed suddenly heavier, a tangible reminder of possibilities still unexplored, of a night imprinted on her memory that no amount of professional distance could erase. Chapter 5. The Discovery. 6 weeks after the charity gala, Althea stood frozen in her bathroom, staring at the plastic test stick in her trembling hand. 2 pink lines. Unmistakable, definitive, pregnant. The floor seemed to shift beneath her as she sank onto the edge of the bathtub. She was meticulous about birth control, had been since medical school. But that night in the storm, the rush of passion, the overwhelming need that had consumed them both. Precautions had become secondary to desire. "This can't be happening," she whispered to her empty apartment. But her body had been sending signals for days. The unusual fatigue, the subtle nausea during morning rounds, her heightened sensitivity to hospital scents that had never bothered her before. As a doctor, she'd recognized the symptoms, yet had attributed them to stress, to lack of sleep, to the emotional aftermath of her night with Sean. Sean, the father of her child. The thought sent a fresh wave of panic through her. Their worlds had briefly collided in a perfect storm of attraction and circumstance, but they'd separated back into their respective orbits. She'd seen him exactly once since the gala, across a crowded cafe near the hospital, their eyes meeting briefly before she'd fled, coffee forgotten on the counter. Now their lives would be permanently, irrevocably entwined. Retrieving her phone with numb fingers, Althea opened her calendar. Simple math confirmed what she already knew. Conception had occurred during that single passionate night at the beach house. One night, one moment of abandoned caution, one life-altering consequence. Dr. Amaya to cardiology, stat. Her pager beeped with urgent summons, the familiar call to professional duty, momentarily drowning out her personal crisis. Tucking the test into her drawer, she splashed cold water on her face and straightened her white coat. The baby, she couldn't even think the word without dizziness threatening, would have to wait. Her patients needed her now. 3 cardiac emergencies and a lengthy consultation later, Althea finally retreated to her office, closing the door against the hospital's constant activity. The medical professional in her had already begun cataloging necessary steps. Confirm with blood work, calculate due date, evaluate prenatal vitamins, schedule an ultrasound. The woman in her was terrified. She'd built her life around medicine, around control and careful planning. A child had always been a someday consideration, someday when her practice was established, someday when she'd found the right partner, someday when the timing was perfect. Not now, not like this. Not with a man she barely knew yet couldn't forget. Her hand drifted unconsciously to her still flat abdomen. Inside her, cells were dividing, systems forming, a heart already beating in microscopic perfection. As a cardiologist, she knew precisely what developmental stage that heart had reached, knew that electrical impulses were already creating the rhythm that would continue for a lifetime. Dr. Amaya? Her assistant's voice accompanied a soft knock. Mrs. Lowell's test results are back. Althea straightened, professionalism reasserting itself. I'll be right there. For the remainder of her shift, she functioned on autopilot, her mind operating on parallel tracks. The experienced doctor dispensing care while the shocked woman inside processed life-altering news. By evening, exhaustion had settled into her bones as she drove home through light rain, the weather echoing her mood. In her apartment, she kicked off her sensible heels and curled into the window seat overlooking the harbor. Lights from distant ships sparkled on the dark water, reminding her of the view from Sean's beach house, of lightning illuminating their intertwined bodies as waves crashed below. The memory sparked another question that had hovered at the edges of her mind all day. What kind of father would Sean be? She barely knew him. Their connection had been brief, intense, and largely physical. Yet fragments of knowledge surfaced. His gentle patience with his grandmother, his passionate interest in medical advancements, the vulnerability he'd revealed in unguarded moments between midnight kisses. Instinct told her he wouldn't abandon his responsibility, but acknowledging his rights as a father meant allowing him into her carefully ordered life in ways that terrified her. Her phone sat heavy in her hand, his private number still saved, though never dialed. What would she even say? Hello, remember our night together? I'm carrying your child. The thought sent a fresh wave of nausea through her. She needed time to process, to make decisions that weren't clouded by hormones or fear. Medical training had taught her to gather data before drawing conclusions. She would approach this methodically, confirm the pregnancy clinically, evaluate her options, then decide when, or if, to tell Sean. Decision made, Althea scheduled a blood test with an OB colleague for the following morning, swearing her to confidentiality. By afternoon, the lab results confirmed what the home test had indicated. She was approximately 6 weeks pregnant, with hormone levels suggesting a healthy early pregnancy. "I can perform an ultrasound next week," Dr. Rivera offered, her expression carefully non-judgmental. "Have you thought about your options, Althea?" The question lingered as she drove home, windows open to the salt-tinged air. Had she? Abortion was available, legal, a choice many professional women in her position would consider reasonable. Adoption was another possibility, giving the child a home with parents prepared and eager for parenthood. Yet neither option settled comfortably in her mind. Despite the shocking timing, despite the complications this pregnancy presented, something within her had already begun to shift. A protective instinct awakening toward the tiny life developing beneath her heart. At home, she found herself researching prenatal development on her tablet, medical knowledge merging with new personal interest. At 6 weeks, the embryo was the size of a sweet pea, facial features beginning to form, arm buds visible. In 2 more weeks, fingers and toes would develop. Her child, Sean's child. The thought still terrified her, yet beneath the fear lurked something else, a fragile thread of possibility, of connection, of life reshaped into patterns she hadn't anticipated, but might, perhaps, embrace. As dusk settled over the harbor, Althea reached for her phone once more, hovering over Sean's contact information. Her finger trembled above the screen before she set it aside again. Not yet. She needed more time, more certainty about her own feelings before she could navigate his. Outside her window, a ship's horn sounded in the distance. Low, resonant, a call across the water. Althea pressed her palm against the cool glass, watching darkness claim the horizon. Inside her, invisible to the world, new life continued its miraculous development, oblivious to her turmoil, her fears, her indecision. For now, this secret belonged to her alone. One heartbeat nested safely beneath another, both utterly changed by a single storm-swept night that had altered the landscape of her life forever. Chapter 6. Truth Revealed. "I need to see my regular doctor," Lillian Tate insisted, her voice carrying down the hospital corridor. "Doctor, Amaya understands my condition better than anyone." Althea froze mid-stride, patient chart clutched to her chest. 3 weeks had passed since confirming her pregnancy, now entering her 2nd month. She'd successfully avoided both Tates, arranging her schedule to ensure Lillian's follow-ups fell to her colleague, Dr. Sharma. "Mrs. Tate, Dr. Sharma is excellent." The nurse's placating tone was cut short. "I'm certain he is, dear, but I prefer doctor. Amaya, is she here today?" Rounding the corner, Althea found herself face to face with the formidable grandmother, and more dauntingly, Sean himself. He stood protectively beside Lillian's wheelchair, his expression shifting from surprise to intensity as their eyes met. "Dr. Amaya," he said, her title somehow intimate on his lips. "Mr. Tate, Mrs. Tate." Althea nodded professionally, willing her heartbeat to steady. "It's good to see you both. How have you been feeling, Mrs. Tate?" "Better until this morning. Lightheaded, some chest pain." Lillian's shrewd eyes studied Althea. "You look different, dear. Something's changed." Althea felt heat rise to her cheeks. Had pregnancy already altered her appearance in ways perceptible to others? "I've been quite busy. Perhaps I'm a bit tired." "Nonsense, you're glowing." Sean's gaze sharpened at his grandmother's observation, his eyes sweeping over Althea with new attention. "Let's get you examined," Althea said quickly, gesturing to an empty room. "Mr. Tate, would you mind waiting outside while I'd prefer he stay," Lillian interrupted. "At my age, an extra set of ears is useful." With no graceful way to refuse, Althea began examining Lillian, hyper-aware of Sean observing from the corner. His presence filled the small room, making it difficult to concentrate on her patient. "Your pulse is a bit irregular," she noted, fingers pressed to Lillian's wrist. I'd like to run an ECG and check your medication levels. As she reached for the blood pressure cuff, a wave of nausea swept over her unexpectedly. She inhaled sharply, willing the sensation to pass. "Doctor, are you all right?" Lillian asked. "Fine, just..." Althea stepped back, the room suddenly spinning. "Excuse me a moment." She barely made it to the small attached bathroom before her meager breakfast made an unwelcome reappearance. Morning sickness, cruelly misnamed as it struck her at all hours, had intensified over the past week. Rinsing her mouth, Althea stared at her reflection in the small mirror. Pale complexion, slight shadows beneath her eyes, but also the subtle fullness to her features that Lillian had noticed. Pregnancy was already writing itself across her body in ways she couldn't conceal much longer. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Althea?" Sean's voice, low and concerned. "Are you all right?" She opened the door to find him alone, Lillian nowhere in sight. "Where's your grandmother?" "The nurse is taking her for the ECG you ordered." His eyes studied her with unsettling perception. "You're ill. Just a stomach bug," she lied, moving past him toward the sink to wash her hands. "Nothing to worry about." Sean stepped closer, close enough that she could smell his familiar cologne, sandalwood and cedar, instantly triggering memories of their night together. "You've been avoiding me," he said quietly. "And my grandmother. I've been busy. For 2 months." His tone remained gentle, but persistence underlined each word. "What's really going on, Althea?" She turned, intending to maintain professional distance to deflect his questions. But something in his expression, genuine concern mixed with lingering desire, broke through her careful defenses. "I can't do this right now," she whispered, gesturing vaguely between them. "I have patience. You're pale as chalk. You're sick in the morning, and according to my grandmother, you're glowing." His gaze dropped briefly to her midsection, then returned to her face with dawning realization. "Althea, are you pregnant?" The directness of his question left no room for evasion. She could deny it, but the truth would emerge eventually. Medical ethics aside, didn't he deserve to know? Yes. The single syllable fell between them, changing everything. Sean went completely still, shock written across his features. "Mine? There hasn't been anyone else," she confirmed, a flush of indignation coloring her cheeks. "How long have you known?" 3 weeks. I was going to tell you, I just needed time to..." 3 weeks. He raked a hand through his hair, disbelief giving way to hurt. "You've known for 3 weeks that you're carrying my child, and you didn't think I deserved to know immediately." "It's not that simple," Althea defended, lowering her voice as a nurse passed by the open door. "I needed to process this myself first. My career, my life. Everything is affected by this pregnancy." "And you think mine isn't?" His voice remained controlled, but tension radiated from his body. "That's my child too, Althea." The possessive declaration sent an unexpected shiver through her. Protective instinct flared in his eyes, something primal and unmistakable. "How far along?" he asked, gaze dropping again to her abdomen, still flat beneath her white coat. 8 weeks. It happened that night at the beach house. A storm of emotions crossed his face. Shock, wonder, fear, and something that looked remarkably like joy. "We're having a baby," he said, the words half statement, half question. "I'm having a baby," Althea corrected gently. "We're not a couple, Sean. We barely know each other." "Then we'll get to know each other," he countered, his initial shock giving way to determination. "I want to be involved, Althea. Fully involved." Before she could respond, the door opened as Lillian was wheeled back in, her expression brightening at finding them together. "Everything all right, dears?" she asked, glancing between them with suspicious intuition. "Fine, Mrs. Tate," Althea replied professionally, though her shaking hands betrayed her as she reached for the chart. Your ECG shows some mild arrhythmia. I'd like to adjust your medication slightly. As she explained the treatment plan, she felt Sean's gaze on her, intent, questioning, filled with unresolved tension. When Lillian's examination concluded, Althea fled to the hallway, but Sean caught up to her at the nurse's station. "We need to talk properly," he said quietly. "Not here, not like this." "I have patients all afternoon," she demurred. "Dinner, tonight." It wasn't a question. "I'll pick you up at 7. Part of her wanted to refuse, to maintain control of a situation rapidly spinning beyond her grasp. But the determined set of his jaw told her Sean Tate wasn't a man who would be sidelined from his child's life. Not now, not ever. "Fine, 7 o'clock. She scribbled her address on a prescription pad, handing it to him with trembling fingers. "But Sean, I need you to understand something. This pregnancy doesn't automatically make us a family. I've built my life carefully, independently. I won't surrender that, even for this child." He pocketed the address, his expression softening slightly. "I would never ask you to be less than who you are, Althea. But this changes everything, whether you want it to or not." As he turned to rejoin his grandmother, Althea pressed her palm unconsciously against her abdomen, where their child grew, oblivious to the complicated emotions of its parents. For the first time since discovering her pregnancy, fear was joined by something unexpected, a fragile thread of possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, this unplanned journey might lead somewhere neither of them had anticipated, but both might eventually welcome. Chapter 7. Grandmother's Wisdom. Dinner with Sean had been a complex dance of emotions, his barely contained excitement about the baby, her practical concerns about co-parenting arrangements, both of them skirting around the powerful attraction still simmering beneath their careful words. They'd parted with tentative plans, doctor's appointments he would attend, legal considerations they'd address, but little resolution about their personal relationship. 2 days later, Althea found herself making rounds when she spotted Lillian Tate in the hospital garden, seated alone on a bench surrounded by late-blooming roses. The elderly woman wasn't scheduled for an appointment, making her presence puzzling. "Mrs. Tate, is everything all right?" Althea approached, medical concern overriding her reluctance to face Sean's grandmother. Lillian patted the space beside her. "Perfectly fine, dear. I had my driver bring me for a little visit. And please, call me Lillian. We're practically family now." Heat rushed to Althea's cheeks. "He told you." "Of course he did. Sean tells me everything." Lillian's shrewd eyes studied her. "You look worried, my dear. Sit with me a moment." Against her better judgment, Althea sank onto the bench. The garden's tranquility, butterflies drifting between flowers, the gentle burble of a small fountain, contrasted sharply with her inner turmoil. "I raised that boy, you know," Lillian began, her weathered hands smoothing imaginary wrinkles from her elegant slacks. "After his parents' accident, he was so angry, so lost. Just 17, trying to be the man of the family overnight." Althea remained silent, sensing Lillian needed no prompting to continue. "He built that company of his from nothing, not because he cared about being wealthy, but because he needed to prove he could protect me, provide security after losing so much." Fondness softened her features. He never learned how to accept happiness without waiting for it to be snatched away. The observation resonated unexpectedly with Althea. In their limited time together, she'd sensed that quality in Sean, an intensity to his pleasure, as if cataloging each moment for when it inevitably ended. "He's a good man," Lillian continued, "but he's his father's son in some ways, driven, focused, sometimes forgetting there's more to life than work." "I barely know him," Althea admitted. "One night, a few conversations, and now we're having a child together." Sometimes life's greatest gifts arrive in unexpected packages. Lillian reached for Althea's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. My husband and I had 10 years of disappointment before Sean's father arrived. By then, we'd stopped expecting happiness. A butterfly landed briefly on the bench between them before fluttering away. "My career is everything to me," Althea said after a moment. "I've worked so hard to build my reputation, my practice. A baby changes all that, and Sean," she hesitated, "wants everything at once?" Lillian finished with a knowing smile. "Of course he does. That's how he approaches life. But he's also remarkably adaptable when something matters enough." The conversation paused as a nurse approached, clipboard in hand. "Doctor? Amaya, Mr. Henderson's test results are ready." "I'll be right there." Althea stood reluctantly. "I should go." "Before you do," Lillian said, "remember something, dear. You're both afraid. You of losing your independence, him of losing another person he cares for. Fear makes poor foundations for any relationship." The observation struck Althea with unexpected force. Was that the root of her resistance? Not professional ethics or practical concerns, but simple fear of vulnerability. "Thank you for the insight," she said sincerely. "You're carrying my great-grandchild," Lillian replied with a wink. "Consider it my contribution to the cause." That evening, Althea was reviewing charts in her office when a soft knock interrupted her concentration. Looking up, she found Sean at her doorway, a paper bag from her favorite local deli in hand. "My grandmother mentioned you missed lunch," he explained. "Turkey on sourdough, no tomato." The fact that he remembered her preference from their single dinner together warmed something inside her. "Thank you. That's thoughtful." He placed the bag on her desk, maintaining a careful distance. "She also mentioned you two had a talk." "She's quite perceptive," Althea acknowledged, opening the sandwich. The aroma triggered immediate hunger. She had indeed worked through lunch. Sean leaned against the doorframe, his casual stance belied by the intensity of his gaze. "She has opinions about everything, especially me. She loves you very much. She thinks I'm too much like my father." He shrugged, a gesture that didn't quite achieve nonchalance. Workaholic, driven, missing what matters. Althea took a bite of sandwich, considering her response. "Those qualities built your company. They also kept my father from really knowing me before he died." Vulnerability flickered across his features. "I don't want history repeating itself." The simple declaration hung between them, laden with implications for their unborn child. Sean wasn't just claiming responsibility for the pregnancy. He was declaring his intention to be truly present as a father. "I believe you," Althea said softly. Sean's phone chimed with a message. Checking it briefly, he grimaced. "Board meeting emergency. I have to go." He hesitated. "Lillian's condition is worsening again. The medication adjustment isn't working as well as hoped." Concern immediately overrode personal complications. "I'll review her case tomorrow, run some additional tests." "Thank you." His relief was palpable. "She trusts you." As he turned to leave, Althea found herself speaking. "Sean? I have an ultrasound scheduled next week, Tuesday at 10, if you'd like to come." The invitation clearly surprised him. His expression transformed, vulnerability giving way to cautious joy. "I'd like that very much." After he left, Althea found herself touching her abdomen, the slight swells still invisible beneath her lab coat. Lillian's words echoed in her mind. "Fear makes poor foundations for any relationship." Perhaps the greatest wisdom lay in acknowledging the fear rather than denying it. Fear of combining parenthood with career. Fear of entangling her life with Sean's. Fear of the intense connection that had sparked between them from that first accidental touch in Lillian's hospital room. When her phone vibrated with a message, she wasn't surprised to see Sean's name. "Thank you for including me." It means more than you know. Later that night, as Althea prepared for bed, she found herself studying her profile in the bathroom mirror, the subtle changes in her body already apparent to her knowing eye. Somewhere within her, a tiny heart was beating, formed from her DNA and Sean's, physical proof of their brief but powerful connection. For the first time since seeing those two pink lines, possibility outweighed fear as she imagined not just the challenges ahead, but also the unexpected gifts this unplanned journey might bring. Perhaps Lillian was right. Perhaps sometimes the greatest blessings arrived in packages one never thought to request. Chapter 8. Building Bridges. There's your baby. Dr. Rivera pointed to the monitor where a small form flickered in grayscale. Strong heartbeat, measuring right on schedule for 12 weeks. Althea stared, transfixed at the screen, medical knowledge temporarily overshadowed by raw emotion. The abstract concept of pregnancy had transformed into a visible reality. Tiny arms, the curve of a spine, the distinctive profile that was unmistakably human. Beside her, Sean stood absolutely still, his expression a complex blend of awe and disbelief. When he reached for her hand, Althea didn't pull away. "That's our child," he whispered, voice rough with emotion. A rhythmic whooshing filled the room as Dr. Rivera activated the audio. Nice, strong heartbeat, 158 beats per minute. Tears sprang unexpectedly to Althea's eyes at the sound, the tangible proof of life growing within her. Sean's grip tightened, his thumb tracing soothing circles on her palm. "Everything looks perfect, Doctor," Rivera announced, capturing images. "I'll give you two a moment." When the door closed behind her, Sean finally tore his gaze from the monitor to look at Althea, vulnerability naked on his face. "Thank you," he said simply, "for letting me be here." Althea nodded, unable to speak past the emotion tightening her throat. For weeks, she'd maintained careful distance, treating the pregnancy as a medical condition to be managed. But the rapid flutter of their child's heartbeat had shattered that clinical detachment, connecting her to Sean in ways she couldn't dismiss. "Would you like prints?" she asked, gesturing to the ultrasound images on the monitor. "I'd like that very much." His smile reached his eyes, softening the sharp angles of his face. "Dinner tonight? To celebrate?" The invitation hung between them, an overture beyond medical appointments and practical discussions. "Just dinner," she clarified. "Just dinner?" he agreed with a smile that suggested he'd take whatever she offered. Sean's driver delivered them to a small seaside restaurant nestled among cliffs, far from the hospital and city bustle. Inside, warm copper light bathed intimate tables, while windows framed the ocean's darkening expanse. "I remembered you mentioned liking this place," Sean explained as they were seated at a corner table offering both privacy and stunning views. The thoughtful gesture surprised her. "You have a good memory." "For things that matter," he replied simply. Over fresh seafood and sparkling water, Sean foregoing wine in solidarity with her pregnancy restrictions, conversation flowed more easily than Althea had expected. The ultrasound had shifted something between them, creating a fragile bridge across the chasm of uncertainty. "Have you thought about names?" Sean asked as they shared a dessert of lemon tart. "Not yet," she admitted. "It still feels surreal." "Even after seeing our little acrobat today?" His use of "our" sent a complicated warmth through her. "Especially after seeing them," she smiled. "Medical knowledge doesn't prepare you for the emotional reality." "Nothing could have prepared me," Sean agreed, his expression turning reflective. "When my parents died, I thought I understood how quickly life can change. But this," he gestured between them, "this is change of a different magnitude." The vulnerability in his admission touched something in Althea. Perhaps for the first time, she truly saw beyond the billionaire CEO to the man shaped by loss and responsibility. "I'm scared," she confessed quietly. Not of pregnancy or motherhood exactly, but of how completely this changes the life I've built. Instead of offering platitudes, Sean simply nodded. I understand. Control has been my coping mechanism too, since I was 17. His perception surprised her. How did you know? We're more alike than you might think, Althea. Driven, independent, careful about who we let close. The observation was uncomfortably accurate. Her career success had come partly from maintaining firm boundaries, from never allowing emotional entanglements to complicate her professional focus. I need to know something, she said, meeting his gaze directly. What do you want from this situation? From me? Sean considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Honestly? Everything. A real chance for us, a family for our child, but I'll settle for whatever you're willing to give. The raw honesty of his answer disarmed her. No manipulation, no pressure, just truth. After dinner, he suggested a walk along the restaurant's private beach. The night air carried salt and the distant scent of rain as they strolled barefoot across cool sand, shoes dangling from their hands. Lillian used to bring me here after my parents died, Sean said, breaking a comfortable silence. She said the ocean puts human problems in perspective. She's a remarkable woman. She'd like to be more involved when you're ready. His tone remained carefully neutral. No pressure. They stopped where gentle waves kissed the shore, the half-moon silvering the water's surface. Standing beside him, Althea felt the walls she'd constructed begin to crumble. This man, this situation, neither fit into her carefully planned life. Yet something about Sean's patient persistence, his willingness to accept her terms while gently offering alternatives, wore away at her resistance. When the first raindrop fell, neither moved immediately. The light shower seemed a gentle reminder of that first storm that had brought them together. We should head back, Sean said reluctantly. At the restaurant entrance, sheltered from increasing rain, he hesitated. Thank you for today, Althea. On impulse, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a kiss unlike their previous passionate encounters. This was gentle, questioning, a tentative exploration rather than hungry demand. His response matched her hesitancy, hands remaining respectfully at his sides, though she felt the restraint it cost him. When they separated, his eyes held a question she wasn't yet ready to answer. Good night, Sean, she whispered, stepping back. Good night. His smile held promise rather than disappointment. I'll call you tomorrow. As her car pulled away, Althea touched her lips, still warm from his kiss. The bridge between them remained fragile, incomplete. But for the first time, she found herself willing to meet him in the middle, one careful step at a time. Chapter 9. Conflicting Worlds. Dr. Amaya, is it true you're having billionaire Sean Tate's baby? The question, hurled across the hospital parking lot by a photographer partially concealed behind a parked car, froze Althea mid-stride. Before she could process what was happening, more figures emerged with cameras, their rapid-fire shutters clicking like mechanical insects. How far along are you? Was this planned? Are you two engaged? Shock rendered her momentarily immobile as flashes burst around her. Then instinct kicked in. Protect herself, protect her child, and she hurried toward the hospital entrance, head down, one hand unconsciously shielding her small but now visible baby bump beneath her coat. Security personnel rushed to intercept the photographers as she reached the safety of the lobby, a nurse immediately escorting her to a private staff area. Her hands trembled as she sank into a chair, breath coming in short gasps. Doctor, Amaya? The hospital's PR director appeared, expression concerned. Are you all right? We're removing them from the property. How did they know? Althea whispered, reality crashing around her. We've been so careful. Her phone vibrated with an incoming call. Sean. Of course, he'd know already. His security team probably monitored mentions of his name across media platforms. Althea. His voice was tight with controlled fury when she answered. Where are you? Staff lounge. I'm fine, just... I'm sending my head of security. Don't leave until he arrives. The protective command should have irritated her, but shock overwhelmed her usual independence. What happened? How did they find out? Tabloid website. They ran a story this morning with photos of us leaving your last prenatal appointment. His voice softened. I'm sorry, Althea. This is my fault. My visibility makes privacy difficult. 20 minutes later, Althea found herself whisked through a service exit into a sleek black SUV with privacy windows. Sean waited inside, his expression a storm of concern and anger as he immediately took her hands in his. Are you all right? Did they upset you? The genuine worry in his eyes touched her. I'm fine, just startled. They won't bother you again. The steel in his voice suggested consequences for those responsible. I've had my legal team issue cease and desist orders to every outlet that picked up the story. The vehicle moved smoothly through traffic toward Sean's downtown penthouse, a destination Althea realized she hadn't questioned or approved. Where are we going? I need to return to work. I've spoken with your department chief. You're cleared for the day. At her expression, he added, I didn't demand it, Althea. He suggested it. The media attention is disrupting hospital operations. Frustration flared. So I'm just supposed to hide? This is exactly what I feared. My life, my career, compromised because of your public profile. The hurt that flashed across his face made her regret her sharp tone, but the morning's events had confirmed her worst fears about their relationship becoming public. This will blow over, he said quietly as the car entered his building's private underground garage. But until it does, security is advisable. His penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of one of the city's most prestigious buildings. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered spectacular ocean views, while understated luxury defined the interior. Despite her agitation, Althea noted the space reflected Sean himself. Confident, sophisticated, yet less ostentatious than his wealth might suggest. I've had lunch prepared, he offered. You should eat something. I'm not hungry. Her arms wrapped protectively around herself as she paced toward the windows. I'm trying to process how completely my privacy has been violated. Those photos will be everywhere. Not if I can help it, Sean promised, maintaining distance as if sensing her need for space. My team is working to contain this. Contain this? Disbelieving laughter escaped her. You can't put this genie back in the bottle. Every patient, every colleague will see those photos. Speculation about my personal life, my professional judgment. Althea. He approached slowly, hands raised in a calming gesture. I understand you're upset, but this doesn't diminish your accomplishments or abilities. Easy for you to say. The words burst out, fueled by hormones and genuine fear. Men are congratulated for having children. Women are questioned about their commitment to their careers. Add in my connection to you, and suddenly I'm not Dr. Amaya anymore. I'm Sean Tate's pregnant girlfriend. The title hung between them, a label they'd never quite defined, accurate yet insufficient to describe their complex relationship. Sean's expression softened. Is that what you are, my girlfriend? The unexpected question diffused some of her anger. I don't know what I am, she admitted, sinking onto a nearby sofa. Everything's happening so fast. He joined her, maintaining careful distance. For what it's worth, I hate that this has happened. Your privacy matters to me. I know. The admission came easier than expected. Despite her frustration, she didn't doubt his intentions. But this is the reality of your world, isn't it? Constant scrutiny, privacy as a luxury rather than a right. Parts of it, he acknowledged. But there are ways to manage it. By living in secured buildings, traveling with bodyguards, never knowing who's watching. She gestured around the opulent space. This isn't my world, Sean. Something vulnerable flickered in his eyes. It could be. Not this specific place, but a life we build together. Somewhere that's neither entirely yours nor mine, but ours. The suggestion, the first time he'd explicitly proposed a shared future beyond co-parenting, stilled her. Before she could respond, her phone chimed with an incoming message. The text contained a link to a tabloid website. Exclusive, Billionaire secret baby, Tate's doctor lover carrying heir to fortune. Beneath the sensationalized headline were photos, Sean helping her into his car after her appointment, his hand protectively at the small of her back. Another of them dining at a waterfront restaurant, his fingers briefly touching hers across the table. Moments of private connection transformed into public spectacle. "I can't do this," she whispered, the phone slipping from her fingers. "I can't have my life dissected for strangers' entertainment." Sean retrieved the phone, his expression darkening as he viewed the article. "I'm sorry," he said again, the words clearly inadequate even to his own ears. "This isn't just about me anymore." Althea's hand moved protectively to her stomach. "Our child will grow up under this microscope." "Unless we control the narrative," Sean suggested carefully. A simple statement acknowledging our relationship and requesting privacy might reduce the feeding frenzy. The practical suggestion, delivered without pressure, reminded Althea why she'd found herself increasingly drawn to this man despite their different worlds. Behind the wealth and power lay a thoughtful mind that complemented her own analytical approach. Perhaps, she conceded, emotional fatigue replacing anger. But this doesn't solve the fundamental issue, Sean. Your life and mine exist in separate orbits. How do we reconcile that? Instead of empty reassurances, he considered the question seriously. By creating a new center of gravity, our child, a life designed around what matters to both of us. The philosophical answer surprised her, suggesting deeper reflection than she'd given him credit for. "I can't move in here," she said, gesturing to the penthouse. "This isn't me. I wouldn't ask you to." His response came quickly, evidently sincere. "What if I found us a place, not my territory or yours, but neutral ground? Somewhere with security, but also with the warmth your apartment has, that this place lacks." The suggestion held appeal, a compromise rather than capitulation. Still, fear lingered. "And my career? My independence?" "Non-negotiable aspects of who you are," Sean said simply. "I would never ask you to be less than yourself, Althea. That woman, brilliant, independent, occasionally stubborn, is who I'm falling in love with." The declaration hung between them, unexpected yet somehow inevitable. In the wake of chaos, he'd offered not protection through control, but partnership through compromise. "I need time," she said finally. "Today has been overwhelming." Of course. He didn't press for reciprocated feelings or immediate decisions. "My driver can take you home whenever you're ready. The media should have dispersed by now." As Althea prepared to leave hours later, Sean handed her a small box. "Security measures," he explained. "Not tracking devices or anything invasive, just a direct line to my team if you need assistance." The thoughtfulness of the gesture, protection offered without demands, softened her lingering resistance. At the elevator, she surprised them both by rising on tiptoes to press a gentle kiss to his cheek. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for understanding why this is difficult for me." His smile held hope rather than victory. "We'll figure this out, Althea. Different worlds don't have to mean incompatible ones." As the elevator descended, Althea found herself wondering if perhaps he was right, if the very differences that frightened her might also create a stronger foundation than either could build alone. Chapter 10. Lillian's Intervention. "Excellent progress, Mrs. Tate." Althea removed her stethoscope, genuinely pleased with her patient's improvement. The new medication protocol is working beautifully. Lillian grasped Althea's hand, her paper-thin skin surprisingly strong. I feel better than I have in months, my dear. Your treatment has given me new life. The credit goes to your determination, Althea replied, touchingly aware of how much she'd come to care for this formidable woman over the past weeks. Nonsense. It's your exceptional care. Lillian's shrewd eyes studied her. Now tell me, how is my great-grandchild progressing? You're showing quite beautifully. At nearly 5 months pregnant, Althea's figure had blossomed beyond concealment. Her hand moved unconsciously to the curve of her abdomen, growing perfectly, very active, especially at night. Just like Sean was, Lillian smiled nostalgically. His poor mother barely slept her last trimester. The mention of Sean created a familiar tightness in Althea's chest. Since the media incident 3 weeks ago, they'd maintained cautious distance, consulting on the baby's development via text, meeting only for medical appointments. The tabloid frenzy had indeed diminished with time, just as he'd predicted, but Althea remained wary of public appearances together. Speaking of my grandson, Lillian continued with suspicious casualness, I've persuaded him to take me to his beach house this weekend. The sea air would do wonders for my recovery. That sounds lovely, Althea replied, noting medication adjustments on Lillian's chart. Of course, I'll need medical supervision. Such a recent cardiac event requires monitoring, don't you agree? Althea glanced up, suddenly understanding the elderly woman's direction. Mrs. Tate, Lillian, dear. And before you refuse, consider that I genuinely would feel safer with my doctor nearby. The house has plenty of room, complete privacy, and you could consider it a proper medical consultation. The transparent matchmaking should have annoyed Althea. Instead, she found herself fighting a smile at Lillian's determination. Is Sean aware of this plan? He suggested it, Lillian replied with triumphant simplicity. The beach house looked different in daylight, less intimidating, more welcoming than Althea remembered from that stormy night. Sunlight danced across polished wood floors and illuminated artwork she hadn't noticed before. Local seascapes, rather than the ostentatious pieces she'd expected from a billionaire's retreat. Your suite connects to mine, Lillian explained as a housekeeper showed Althea to a lovely ocean view room. In case of emergency, though I doubt there will be one. I feel marvelous. The knowing twinkle in the older woman's eyes suggested she understood perfectly well her medical need was merely pretext. Before Althea could respond, Lillian continued briskly. Sean's working on some tedious conference calls until dinner. I think I'll rest before then. With remarkable speed for a cardiac patient, she disappeared into her own suite, leaving Althea alone. The afternoon stretched pleasantly as Althea explored the property. The house, while undeniably luxurious, surprised her with its comfortable warmth. Bookshelves lined the main living area, filled not with decorative tomes but well-read volumes, many scientific or historical. A baby grand piano occupied one corner, sheet music suggesting it served purpose beyond decoration. On the wide deck overlooking the ocean, she found a medical journal she'd been meaning to read, left casually beside a comfortable lounge chair. Sean's thoughtfulness in remembering her professional interests touched her unexpectedly. The sun began its descent toward the horizon when she heard footsteps behind her. Turning, she found Sean watching her, his expression a careful blend of hope and restraint. You came, he said simply. Your grandmother can be very persuasive. His smile acknowledged the obvious setup. She means well. I know. Althea marked her place in the journal. Your house is beautiful in daylight. Would you like to walk down to the beach before dinner? The sunset is spectacular. The invitation carried no pressure, offered as casually as one might suggest a coffee. Yet they both recognized its significance, a first tentative step back toward the connection they'd begun building before the media intrusion. Sand still warm from the day's heat cushioned their bare feet as they strolled along the private cove. Wavelets curled lazily against the shore while gulls wheeled overhead, their cries mingling with the rhythmic ocean sounds. "How have you been?" Sean asked finally, breaking comfortable silence. "Good. Busy. The baby kicked hard enough for someone else to feel it this week." Regret flashed across his features. "I'm sorry I missed that." "There will be plenty more opportunities," she offered, surprising herself with the implied future togetherness. They reached a natural seating area, smooth boulders arranged in a semicircle facing the sunset's developing masterpiece. Sean helped her settle onto one before taking a respectful distance on another. "I've missed you," he said simply, gaze fixed on the horizon where orange fire merged with deepening blue. The admission hung between them, honest without being demanding. Althea studied his profile, struck again by the contradictions he embodied. Powerful yet vulnerable, confident yet careful with her boundaries. "I've missed you too," she confessed, the truth easier to acknowledge in this peaceful setting away from hospitals and photographers. "I needed space after what happened." "I understand." He turned to face her fully. "I've been looking at properties, places with privacy but not isolation. There's one with a separate guest apartment that could become a home office for you." The revelation that he'd continued pursuing solutions to their different needs during their separation touched her deeply. "You don't give up easily, do you?" she observed. "Not on things that matter." His gaze dropped briefly to her rounded abdomen, then returned to her face with unwavering certainty. "And you matter, Althea, not just as our child's mother." The simple declaration carried more weight than flowery professions of love might have. Emotion tightened her throat as she reached across the space between them, offering her hand. He took it gently, their fingers interlacing as naturally as if they'd been holding hands for years rather than minutes. "I'm still scared," she admitted. "Your world is so different from mine." "Not as different as you might think." His thumb traced soothing patterns across her knuckles. "We both value privacy, meaningful work, making a difference. The trappings may differ, but the essentials align." Behind them, lights illuminated the beach house windows as evening deepened. Through one, they could see Lillian arranging flowers on the dining table, her matchmaking intentions transparent. "Your grandmother is quite the strategist," Althea laughed softly. "Formidable," Sean agreed with affectionate exasperation. "But in this case, I can't fault her methods." As darkness settled around them, stars emerging like scattered diamonds across velvet, they remained hand in hand, the ocean's timeless rhythm echoing the heartbeat of possibility between them. "Dinner should be ready," Sean said finally, helping her to her feet with gentle care. "One moment," Althea whispered, stepping closer. Rising slightly on tiptoes, she pressed her lips to his, a kiss that held neither the desperate passion of their first night nor the tentative question of their reconciliation dinner. This was something new. Gentle certainty, a promise of possibilities unfolding. When they separated, Sean's eyes held a depth of emotion that needed no translation. Without words, they turned toward the welcoming lights of the house, walking closely enough that their shoulders occasionally touched, two separate paths gradually converging toward a shared horizon. Chapter 11. The Compromise. "What do you think?" Sean asked, his expression carefully neutral as Althea explored the sunlit house, perched on a gentle hillside overlooking the coast. The property was nothing like she'd expected when he'd suggested viewing potential homes. Not a mansion or modern showpiece, but a graceful Mediterranean-style residence with terracotta tiles and climbing bougainvillea framing sea-view windows. Inside, warm wood and natural stone created spaces that felt both elegant and comfortable. "It's beautiful," she admitted, running her fingers along a built-in bookshelf. At 7 months pregnant, her movements had slowed, but her appreciation for thoughtful design remained keen. The previous owner was an architect, Sean explained, following at a respectful distance. She designed the space for her family, not to impress visitors. The observation struck Althea as significant. Throughout their evolving relationship, Sean had consistently demonstrated understanding of her values, comfort over ostentation, meaning over status. "Show me the rest," she encouraged, genuinely curious now. Beyond the main living areas, he led her down a short hallway that opened to a completely separate wing. "This was originally designed as a home office and guest quarters," he explained, pushing open double doors to reveal a light-filled space with separate entrance and small private garden. "It could easily be converted to a research office or consultation space for you." Althea moved slowly through the rooms, taking in the thoughtful layout that would allow professional separation while maintaining proximity to their child. "You've put considerable thought into this." "I've been looking at properties for months," he admitted, "even before everything." The revelation surprised her. "That long?" His shrug held vulnerability rarely glimpsed beneath his usual confidence. "I wanted to be prepared if you ever decided we might have a future beyond co-parenting." Since the weekend at the beach house 2 months earlier, they had cautiously rebuilt their connection. Dinners, quiet evenings at her apartment, even a few public appearances that had generated far less media interest than Althea had feared. Yet they'd carefully avoided discussing permanent living arrangements until today. "And the main house?" she asked, returning to the central living area. "It has good space for a nursery." "Fourth door on the right," he directed, hanging back as if recognizing her need to explore independently. The room caused her breath to catch, clearly intended as a nursery with its perfect proportions and southern exposure, yet blessedly unstaged. No pressure-inducing decorated crib or presumptuous color scheme, just sunlight spilling across hardwood floors and a window seat overlooking a garden where hummingbirds darted between flowering shrubs. "This would be perfect," she whispered, picturing their child growing in this peaceful space. When she turned, Sean stood in the doorway, his expression a mixture of hope and restraint. "There's one more feature I thought you might appreciate." Beyond the kitchen's French doors, a covered walkway led to a separate cottage nestled among mature trees. "For Lillian," he explained as they approached. "She needs her independence too, but wants to be near enough to help with the baby." The consideration for his grandmother's needs and acknowledgement of the importance Lillian now held in Althea's life as well touched her deeply. "You've thought of everything," she observed, lowering herself carefully onto a garden bench as fatigue caught up with her. Sean sat beside her, maintaining a small space between them. "I've tried to create a compromise that honors what matters to each of us. Your career and independence, my desire to be fully present for our child, Lillian's role in our lives." "And the neighbors?" Althea asked practically. "No paparazzi concerns?" "Mostly medical professionals and university faculty. Privacy is valued here." His smile held gentle understanding of her lingering concerns. "And security features are state-of-the-art without being intrusive." As they sat in companionable silence, a butterfly drifted lazily through the garden, wings catching sunlight as it moved from bloom to bloom. The metaphor wasn't lost on Althea. Transformation, beauty emerging from confinement, flight achieved after struggle. "I've been offered a research grant," she said suddenly. "The cardiac regeneration study I've been developing for years. Full funding, but demanding hours." If the apparent non sequitur surprised Sean, he didn't show it. "That's wonderful news. When would it begin?" 6 months after delivery. They're allowing extended maternity leave before the project launches." His response held no hint of the territorial resistance she'd feared. You've worked toward this for years. I'm happy for you, Althea. You understand what it means. My career advancing alongside motherhood? I'd be disappointed if you set aside your brilliance for any reason, including our child. His sincerity was unmistakable. We'll make it work. Between us and Lillian, our baby will have all the love and attention needed. The simple statement, so different from the controlling reactions she'd once feared from a man of his wealth and position, crystallized something Althea had been slowly recognizing. Sean truly valued her complete self, not some diminished version that would fit more neatly into his world. I think, she said carefully, her hand finding his on the bench between them, this house would be a wonderful place for our child to grow up. The significance of her words registered immediately in his expression, cautious joy mixed with disbelief. Are you saying yes to living together? I'm saying yes to building a home together, she clarified, with appropriate boundaries and spaces for each of us, but shared purpose. Sean lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles with reverence that made her heart flutter. Thank you for trusting me with this, he said softly. We're trusting each other, she corrected, feeling their child shift within her as if emphasizing the point. That's the only way this works. As afternoon sunlight dappled the garden around them, Althea leaned against Sean's shoulder, allowing herself to envision their future in this place. Careers and passions intact, but enhanced by the family they were creating together. Not a surrender of independence, but a strengthening of individual purpose through shared commitment. The butterfly completed its garden journey, rising on delicate wings toward the endless blue above, free yet connected to the ground that had nourished its transformation. Chapter 12. Full circle waves crashed against the shoreline as evening descended, painting the sky in watercolor strokes of amber, rose, and deepening purple. Althea stood on the beach house deck, one hand resting on her full 9-month belly, the other holding a flute of sparkling cider. The same beach house where everything had begun nearly a year ago now welcomed them back, though under vastly different circumstances. Penny for your thoughts, Sean's voice came softly from behind her, his arms slipping around her expanded waistline to cradle their child. Just remembering, she replied, leaning back against his solid warmth. The storm, that night. How terrified I was the next morning of what we'd started. His lips brushed her temple. Regrets? Not one. She turned in his embrace, her amber eyes meeting his blue ones with the honesty they'd cultivated between them. Though I wouldn't have believed it then if you'd shown me where we'd be now. Their new home awaited their return. The Mediterranean hillside house now fully prepared for their child's arrival. Lillian had moved into the cottage last week, filling it with carefully chosen antiques and family photographs that bridged past and future. Althea's office wing had been equipped with everything she'd need for her research once maternity leave ended. Yet before embarking on that next chapter, Sean had suggested one night at the beach house, a deliberate return to where their journey began. Come inside, he murmured against her hair. I have something for you. The main living room had been transformed, candles flickering in hurricane lamps, fresh flowers scenting the air, a small table set for an intimate dinner beside panoramic windows that framed the fading sunset. I thought we'd already exchanged baby gifts, Althea observed, noting a small wrapped package at her place setting. This isn't for the baby. Sean guided her to her seat with gentle care before taking his own. This is for you, for us. Dinner progressed with quiet conversation, reminiscences of their unconventional beginning, hopes for their imminent future, comfortable silences filled with shared understanding that had grown between them over months of learning each other's rhythms and needs. As Sean served dessert, the same tiramisu they'd shared on their first dinner together, Althea finally reached for the small package, curiosity overcoming patience. Inside lay a vintage music box, its wooden surface inlaid with mother-of-pearl in a pattern that echoed ocean waves. "Open it," Sean encouraged, his expression holding anticipation she couldn't quite decipher. When she lifted the lid, familiar music filled the air, the same melody that had played on the restaurant radio during that stormy night that changed everything. But nestled inside, instead of the traditional dancing ballerina, lay something that caught the candlelight with diamond brilliance. "I know we've talked about doing things differently," Sean said, moving from his chair to kneel beside hers despite her protests that he shouldn't kneel on the hard floor. "About creating our own traditions rather than following expected paths." The ring was unlike any engagement ring she'd seen. A simple platinum band holding not a traditional diamond solitaire, but a constellation of smaller stones arranged like stars across a night sky. "Each stone represents a moment that brought us here," he explained, his voice low with emotion. "The night we met, our first appointment together, the ultrasound, the beach weekend." Tears filled Althea's eyes as her fingers hovered above the ring, understanding the thought behind such a personalized creation. "This isn't a traditional proposal," Sean continued, taking her hand in his. "I know you value your name, your identity. I'd never ask you to surrender any part of who you are. But I want you to know that I love you, Althea Amaya, completely. The brilliant doctor, the cautious woman who guarded her heart, the passionate lover, the mother of our child. Every facet, every complexity." He lifted the ring from its velvet nest. "This is a promise to support your dreams alongside my own, to build a family that honors both our needs, to love you more fully each day than the last." "Yes," she whispered before he could even form the question, her hands framing his face. "Yes, to all of it, to everything we're creating together." As he slipped the ring onto her finger, the baby kicked forcefully, making them both laugh through tears. "I think someone approves," Sean said, pressing his palm against the movement. "Or objects to being squished while we're getting sentimental," Althea countered, with the practical humor he'd come to adore. The evening deepened around them as they moved to the plush rug before the fireplace, the same spot where their child had been conceived during that long-ago storm. Now Sean created a nest of pillows and blankets, helping Althea find comfort despite her advanced pregnancy. "Dance with me," he requested, extending his hand as the music box continued its gentle melody. "I'm not exactly graceful these days," she smiled, allowing him to help her to her feet nonetheless. Their dance was less movement than embrace, swaying gently as his arms supported her, her head resting against his chest where she could hear the strong, steady beat of his heart. The synchronicity they discovered in passion had evolved into something deeper, a rhythm of partnership that complemented rather than constrained each individual cadence. "I think I loved you from that first touch in the hospital," Sean confessed, his fingers tracing the elegant line of her spine. "Something in me recognized something in you even then." Althea's hand covered his where it rested protectively on her belly. "I was too afraid to admit it, even to myself. But yes, there was always something between us, something inevitable." Their kiss began tenderly, a celebration of promises exchanged, but quickly deepened as the connection that had sparked between them from the beginning rekindled. Pregnancy had only enhanced Althea's responsiveness to his touch, her body hypersensitive as his fingers traced paths he'd learned would bring her pleasure. "Is this safe?" he whispered against her throat, always careful, always concerned for her comfort despite his obvious desire. "More than safe," she assured him, guiding his hand beneath the flowing dress she wore. "Recommended, even." Their lovemaking had evolved over the months, finding new expressions as her body changed. Tonight held a heightened tenderness, his touch reverent as he worshipped the fullness of her breasts, the magnificent curve of her belly, the places where their child's growth had marked her skin with silvery lines he treated as badges of honor rather than flaws. When words became unnecessary, when the music box's melody had long since faded into silence, They communicated through the language their bodies had perfected, his fingers and lips drawing gasps and sighs from her, her hands guiding him to join with her in the careful, profound intimacy that pregnancy allowed. Afterward, wrapped in blankets and each other before the dying fire, Althea traced lazy patterns across Sean's chest while his fingers combed gently through her hair. The comfortable silence between them spoke of barriers long since dismantled, of trust painstakingly built, of futures deliberately entwined. "When do we tell Lillian?" Althea asked, the ring catching firelight as she admired it on her hand. "She probably already knows," Sean chuckled. "She has a sixth sense about these things." A particularly forceful kick from their child interrupted the moment, making them both laugh. "Someone's impatient to join the celebration," Althea observed, placing Sean's hand where movement rippled across her abdomen. His expression held wonder that hadn't diminished since the first flutter months ago. "I can't believe how fortunate I am," he said softly. "A year ago I was alone except for Lillian, focused on work, missing something I couldn't even name. Now, ... Now we have everything that matters," Althea finished, pressing her lips to his in a kiss that held promise rather than passion, future rather than past. When dawn painted the horizon with golden light, they lay still, entwined in their nest of blankets, Althea's head pillowed on Sean's chest, his arm protectively around her shoulders. Outside, the storm of the previous year had been replaced by gentle morning light illuminating peaceful waters, a fitting metaphor for the journey that had brought them here. The music box sat open on the mantel, its melody silent yet somehow still echoing in the air between them, a reminder of stormy beginnings transformed into peaceful certainty, of passion evolved into partnership, of unexpected gift grown into cherished treasure. As sunlight spilled across their intertwined forms, Althea lifted her face for Sean's kiss, their lips meeting with the perfect synchronicity of waves meeting shore, separate elements forever connected by forces greater than themselves, creating something more beautiful together than either could achieve alone.